Hello, and welcome back to a new season of ACRO's Good Clinical Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia McLeod, and today's episode is focused on the patient experience. I'm joined by two wonderful guests, Alicia Staley, who serves as Vice President of Patient Engagement at Medidata, and Stacy Hurt, Chief Patient Officer at Parexel. Alicia and Stacy are here to tell us how their experience as patients and Stacy's additional experience as a caregiver inform the work they do in the clinical trials industry, and how we can move the idea of patient centricity from buzzword to action. And with that, let's get into the episode. So, Stacy, Alicia, thank you so much for joining me today on GCP. This is a topic that I'm personally very excited to talk about with you guys. I'm really excited to kind of hear your perspective. I think patient centricity is sort of a buzzword in the industry, but I'm really excited to kind of get into the real meat of it today and kind of hear from you guys what's not being talked about, what you'd really like to shine a light on. And again, like I said, just kind of hear everything you're thinking. So sort of want to start with the unique perspectives you both kind of bring to the conversation. You know, you're both cancer survivors. Stacy, you're also a caregiver. So maybe if we start with Alicia, would just love to hear a bit about how your experience as a patient have informed the way that you approach patient centricity as we talk about it in the industry.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And I think it's very difficult for me to separate my patient experience from the work that I do at this point in my career. I am an engineer by training, and also a 3-time cancer survivor. So I feel like at this point in the work that I'm doing, there's no reason for me to separate my personal and professional experience, to be honest with you. And being a patient and trying to grapple with the concept of patient centricity, I think is an interesting perspective, because first and foremost, you always want to be a champion for the patient experience. You always want a patient that's going through clinical research or some sort of, major treatment journey to be able to have the best experience possible, the most efficient experience, the most empathetic experience. And I think that if we lose sight of that, we lose our North Star, so to speak. And it makes it very, very difficult to do the work that we need to do to really bring about change. So for me, I think the patient experience that I've personally had absolutely shapes the way that I view patient centricity. It is an absolute requirement in the work that we're doing. We can no longer afford to work without the patient truly at the forefront of what we're trying to accomplish. We cannot do things in silos anymore. We can't do things on a transactional basis. We have to start looking at the patient experience as a very holistic component of clinical research and healthcare in general.
Yeah, just to build off everything that Alicia said, just what she said, my work is my life and my life is my work. And, I think that what both of us bring that's unique to our roles is, that we've gone through it ourselves. And if there's one thing, in terms of patient centricity, patients want to listen to people who have walked in their shoes, who have gone through what they have gone through. And, unfortunately for both of us being cancer survivors, that we had to go through that to build up this level of credibility and trust. And I think that that's really what lends a degree of respect to both of our roles that maybe doesn't exist elsewhere, is because, we get it, patients, we see you, we've been there with you, we've been in that chair getting chemo, we've done that. We feel your pain, and we want to translate that pain into purpose, in our work. We have walked that walk of your struggle, and we want to make it better for people after us. And you don't really, before in patient centricity and patient experience, it used to be maybe a healthcare professional, a physician speaking for the patient. But now with the internet, and we have a much more informed patient population, 80% of Americans go out to the internet to Dr. Google before seeing a doctor. So you have a much more informed base, and we can speak for ourselves. Patients can speak for ourselves, and we now have a seat at the table to speak up and talk about more relevant endpoints in clinical research, about reducing burden, about increasing access to trials because of the information that we have. And this era of patient empowerment, Alicia and I have been waiting for this for 20 years. I think it's safe to say, right, Alicia? And to be here for it and to be a part of it is the honor of a lifetime, for sure.
Yeah, if I may just add a few comments to what Stacy just shared. I think I don't think we can stress enough how important it is to both of us to do this kind of work. So for me, it's really about it. This has helped me make sense of my experience too, right? I've been on this journey for 34 years, from the first time I was diagnosed to today. 34 years of starting out with paper records at the cancer center to where we are today. And that 34 years is an absolute lifetime of activity and data collection and information collection. And what we need to get to is making sure that the folks that have to walk this journey after us do it in a better way, a faster way, a more empathetic way, a way that honors them, and respects them a little bit more. And I think that we've learned a lot around what patient centricity really means to an individual person participating in healthcare. And I think I'm not going to speak for Stacy, but I think we both share the same thought that this is a calling that we feel very passionately about making a change and making sure that people just feel better at the end of their experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can confidently say I think you two are really changing the game for the patients who are coming up after you. I think you guys have done really fabulous work, and that's sort of why we wanted to have you here today. And I wanted to dive into the work you're doing at your respective companies. Stacy, you started with Parexel in 2022 as their first official patient ambassador, and now you're the chief patient officer. So what were your first priorities when you stepped into that CPO role? Day one, what goal are we setting? What are we really trying to reach?
Yeah, I came in, not surprisingly, very strong with how I felt just based on question one, and that is being a patient and a caregiver myself. So I would say that my top priority, and it will, I expect to remain throughout my tenure, is to ensure that an upstream patient voice, patient perspective is included throughout the clinical development process to improve the patient experience. So when I say that, I mean that in terms of Parexel being a CRO, every proposal that's coming in that door, I want a patient voice on. If it is a study for breast cancer, I want a breast cancer patient speaking to it. If it is about Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, I want a DMD caregiver or a family or a patient talking about it. Every single, anytime that we have an opportunity to go into a presentation for a trial, I want, a patient, if at all possible, either myself being a patient, I come in on all of our top tier opportunities, to speak as a patient and give that perspective. But if I'm not able to be there myself, if I can't review the protocol, review the patient materials, review the ICF, then I absolutely want, another patient, and then preferably patients from diverse populations. We are a global company. And I'm keenly aware that I'm white and privileged, right? So I have my view of the world, but I want diverse, global reaching views of this therapeutic area, of this indication to be represented because, I am very fortunate to have gone through cancer with the resources that I have, the education I have. What does everybody else do? And those are the people that I want to bring into clinical research. The unseen, the unheard, the marginalized, the vulnerable, the underserved. Those are the people that I want to bring into clinical research. And the only way that we're going to do that is by getting out into those patient communities, listening to patients, understanding their need, and like I said, bringing them right into the clinical development. And I'm in an optimal position here at Parexel, being the chief patient officer, to do that and to drive that. So that, like I said, that's priority number one. But also, within my remit is that internally, I keep our patient voice front and center of everything we do. At Parexel, one of our core values is patients first, and people kind of toss that around. We take that very seriously here. And I make sure that that patient voice is integrated. I spoke to our chief data officer, who was drafting our AI principles document about responsible and ethical use of AI. And I brought in, well, what does that mean to patients? And how do patients view artificial intelligence? What's important to us? The other day, I talked to our head of drug safety, the importance of reporting adverse events. What does it mean to a patient to report adverse events? What do they understand what that means? Why is that important? Not to be so fearful that they're going to be kicked out of a trial, and that what's normal and necessary. Doing something like that. Talking to our head of early phase clinical unit. What's the motivation for a healthy participant to, participate in a clinical trial and everything, and how can we make that clear? And so internally, I am keeping our culture alive and well, and I am the champion of that. And another one of our taglines is with heart. And through being a patient and a caregiver, I want all 22,000 of our employees, when they hear that with heart, they think of, I'm going to do this, on behalf of Stacy, others like her. You know what I mean? So those are some of the things that are super important to me here.
It's a good list. I like it.
Ambitious, yeah.
Yeah, but it's good. Alicia, you are sort of coming at this from a different perspective. You're at Medidata, a company that provides technology to support trials. And technology is something, I think, when we think about it, we're like, oh, that's fabulous. It's going to make everything better. But technology can be notoriously tricky for patients to navigate sometimes.
Yeah.
And so as a patient advocate, what do technology companies like yours and, the other ACRO members need to be keeping in mind? And those that aren't ACRO members, I guess, too. But, what do those tech companies really need to be keeping in mind as they develop these tools to ensure that they don't actually create any unnecessary burden on patients?
I have 3 words to answer that question, and it's empathetic technical solutions. So I am in a position at Medidata to be able to impact how our final solutions look and are received by the patient population. And what my singular goal is, not, yes, bringing the patient perspective to the forefront, but making sure that the solutions that we're delivering are empathetic, that they're efficient, that it encompass the patient point of view, and that they don't put any unintended roadblocks in the way of the patient's experience. We talk a lot about the concept of diversity, and diversity to me goes beyond ethnic and racial divides and by sex and gender divides. We need to talk about diversity when it comes to age. We need to talk about the concept of technical literacy and even just health literacy. And those are all important components that have to make their way into our solutions. And we really do that by allowing our Patient Insights Board, which is a group of patient advocates that represent a number of different therapeutic areas. We allow them to work with our product managers and our engineers to really make sure that, does this screen make sense at this point in time in the clinical trial? Are we asking for the right amount of information when an account is being set up? Depending on what kind of ePros we're using in the trial, are they presented in a way that makes sense to the patient and honors, what kind of questions and data you're trying to collect? So it really becomes about making sure the solutions that we bring to market really work for sponsors, work for sites, work for our CROs, and ultimately work for the patient. Can we wrap the patient around with empathy, right? Can we support them in a way that makes sense at that point in time in their journey? And I am a firm believer that we can do that with technology. We have to just be creative in the way that we design solutions and implement them. Because technology can really enable a lot of progress, a lot of efficiency in this ecosystem. And it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that what goes out to market is always best in class.
Yeah, absolutely. I think leading with empathy is so important here, especially in, when you're actually talking to patients and trying to engage patients in a trial that they are going to be the subjects of it. But I mean, across so many areas of our industry, I think that leading with empathy piece is just so important. I'm glad you've really kind of been hammering that one home. Stacy, on the last question I asked you, we talked a little bit about that idea of how we talk about patient first culture, and similar to like patient centricity, we kind of throw that around a lot. And what does it really mean? What are we really talking about? And so I'm wondering if Stacy, maybe I'll ask you first, and then Alicia, please feel free to jump in too. But is there anything that you guys think is really missing from this conversation about patient first, patient centricity? How do we get to the real operationalization, I guess is the word, of how we actually do this work and make it meaningful?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Alicia, but I think it's fair to say both of us, we get really annoyed when people start tossing around, patients first, patient centricity, patients at this, and I think, fair to say both of us, we're people of action. And, we both are like, well, what are you doing? How are you walking that walk? And, you said it yourself that, patient centricity is a really useless, empty term unless it's operationalized. And you got to do something. A couple things. What I think is missing from the conversation is policy. And that is, when I say that, I mean that we saw that, DEI plans were only required in clinical trials, in phase 3 clinical trials, because of the DEPICT Act. So it took policy for us to do the right thing. Okay, this is what we should have been doing all along, is including diverse populations. And like I said in my last comment, is the underserved and marginalized populations. But it took policy to make people do the right thing. The right thing is including the patient voice throughout clinical research. And those of us, who are participants in getting our voices in. So the FDA, took the right steps in enacting their, guidance around patient-focused drug development, but it's still just guidance. It needs to evolve into policy, and there needs to be a requirement, or there needs to be an incentive for sponsors, if they whereby involve patients start to finish, maybe that they will get priority review or something like that as an incentive if policy isn't going to come in. So we have to really action on this patient involvement, idea, and really kind of start to make it mandatory. My other point before I hand over to my colleague here is that patient involvement should not be transactional. The days of focus groups and advisory boards and one and dones, that's over. That voice needs to come in, like I said, upstream from the very beginning. When I hear a sponsor, magic words to my ears are that the protocol isn't finalized. Great. Let's get patients looking at it. Here at Parexel, we have a global patient advisory council of we're up to like 60 members now worldwide. We have an internal patient community of our own employees sharing their own patient caregiver experiences that contribute to protocols. And those patient voices, as early as possible that we can get a protocol, look at, can we reduce the number of biopsies? Can we put in liquid biopsies instead of invasive biopsies? What can we do? That's patient centricity, reducing burden on the patient. That's what it really is.
I'd like to add to what Stacy just said, though, the transactional nature, right? The one and dones. When I first started as a patient advocate consultant, just about 15 years ago, that was the thing I think that really upset me the most was you know, pharmaceutical companies found me pretty quickly on social media, would ask me to come in, do some consulting around the patient experience. And it was always a one-off opportunity. And I mean, for years, I would follow up on these engagements and go, hey, whatever happened, whatever came out of that advisory board we did, or that workshop I led on patient experience, what happened? Oh, well, we took the final report and, we submitted it to management. I was like, well, what happened next? And it was always, crickets, or, it's pending more investment. Or, it was always like a really good out, or a good way to sort of shut the conversation down. And that to me was the biggest frustration. And I really thought to myself, if I'm really going to make a mark on this industry, I have to be one of those patients that say one and dones are not enough, that we have to embed ourselves in the culture of these organizations in a new way. Like look at what Stacy's doing with Chief Patient Officer. We have to move beyond the old industry mindset of key opinion leaders are only medical doctors or researchers or investigators, and start talking about patient opinion leaders, people that have had the lived experience, that know what it feels like to sit in a chair in the infusion center as part of a clinical trial, that can really provide some incredible feedback on how to make this better. Let's go beyond just collecting data and making an analysis of, it's a yes or a no. Let's start respecting and honoring the contributions that so many patients and participants give in order to find a better way forward in their treatment journeys. And I think we're getting better at it here in the industry, but I really think, what's missing in patient centricity is consistency and more in-depth collaboration. Move away from the one-offs, get to a point like Medidata and Parexel, where you've got entrenched boards of patients and advisors that are coming in specifically to answer questions about the patient experience, the site experience. How do we make this entire ecosystem run more efficiently? And I think that when you can get to that point, you're really starting to hit your stride with patient centricity. But until then, I think you've got to climb up that mountain and get there, because we can't be just an ecosystem of a few companies that are attempting to do this. This is an all hands on deck moment for the industry that I really think can bring significant positive change.
Alicia nailed it on that, this is really a critical moment. And, we've never been closer to, the patient voice being influential. And, Alicia did make me think of a point about, same way, pharma companies were calling me left and right, participate in this ad board, blah, 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 blah. And I went back too, and I said, well, what was the result of that? Oh, we took but show me what you did. And this is why, especially, lay patient summaries are so important at the end of trials. And this is, something that we commit to at Parexel. When we deliver a study, our lay patient summaries back to the patients for them to know, well, what happened with that study? What was the result? Patients sacrifice to be in clinical trials. They volunteer to be in clinical trials. The least that we can do is honor their sacrifice by letting them know what happened as a result of their participation. That is the least that we can do. And so, that is so important. I think getting back, Sophia, to your also, what is missing, we got to have consistent compensation, for patients. Not only participating in clinical trials. I just, published an article in Stat News about this, not only in clinical trials, but in, our patient advisory boards. I just had a patient tell me the other day that she contributed insights, to a protocol And I said, were you compensated for your time and expertise? No, I wasn't. The pharmaceutical company just called me up and asked me, I said, that's unacceptable. The National Health Council has a beautiful fair market value calculator. That's a great starting point for people if, they don't know the basis of compensating patients for time and expertise. As Alicia noted, patients are key opinion leaders ourselves. And as consultants are paid for their time and talent, so should patients be. That is the way, the truth, and the light. So, but that was all I had to add.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think that patient compensation piece is so interesting too. And it makes me think of, what you were saying earlier about policy change. And at ACRO, my day job is doing our sort of like congressional relations stuff. And so you start talking about policy, I'm like, oh yeah, tell me what I need to be doing. Like I'll go up there, I'll let them know. But when we think about compensation, and this really only pinged for me kind of in the trial space specifically and how we talk about like taxes. What a
Mm,
thrilling topic I'm bringing to this conversation. But we have seen some movement on tax exemption on the Hill for patient payments. And I think that's really exciting because we think about those barriers and how that's going to impact patients' ability to still receive other benefits that they might be getting, whether it's SNAP or whatever it may be. And if they can't access those by being, that's just another barrier that I don't personally think makes any sense. So it's just another way of kind of listening to patients and what would make the whole process easier, better, more feasible for them. So that really just pinged in my mind when you said
yeah.
policy and compensation. It got me thinking.
Well, you absolutely should not be penalized for something that's out of your control. I mean, we didn't sign up for cancer. I mean, we didn't ask to get cancer. And, you should not be penalized because you're ill. And you should not be penalized because you want to participate in a clinical trial. That's just ridiculous. And we need to improve the system
Yeah.
for sure.
And I wanted to,
We
so
definitely don't make it easy, though. I mean, like think about it. We sometimes we can't get out of our own way.
yeah,
The
Yeah.
fact that we haven't been able to address this as a topic that should be pushed through, legislation should be. We shouldn't even have to think about something like this. This should have been done years ago. And I'd love to see us make more progress on that in the
yeah.
next year or so, and just put this to rest once and for all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked a lot about, your experiences as patients and how that's really influenced the work you do now and just sort of how you live your lives. But also, Stacy, you've talked about how there are layers to accessibility that you've experienced as a caregiver to your son Emmett. And so, not only do trials need to be made more accessible, but sites themselves have to be more accessible for patients of varying abilities all across the spectrum. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit, about the experiences that you've had with these layers of accessibility kind of with your caregiver hat on.
Sure. Speaking of a broken system, let me tell you, um, being a special needs parent, a parent to, my son who is severely intellectually, developmentally disabled, completely disabled, I can tell you that we are a far ways from an accessible world. And, one of the, we talk about, what's your why? Every time I'm on a panel, what's your why? Well, my why is Emmett, my 18-year-old disabled son. I am really hoping for a cell and gene therapy to improve his quality of life one day. But when I think about him participating in a clinical trial, quite frankly, I'm terrified because I read the protocols and I see what an able-bodied, typical person has to do. There is no way that Emmett could endure, what it takes to be in a trial. And, that really motivates what I do, the work that I'm doing around site accessibility and clinical trial accessibility for those affected by both apparent and non-apparent disabilities, which I'm a non-apparent disability sufferer myself. And I just, again, coming all the way to the top of our conversation, I live this life. I walk in these shoes. So, for Emmett to endure a clinical trial, it would take a ton of preparation ahead of time. I just was on vacation. I had to call the hotel ahead of time. Do you have a bed for him that he won't roll out of? Do you have a shower that he can wheel into and everything. So that's exactly my life. Getting back to our earlier points, my life mirrors my work. I would have to call ahead to the site to ask them, do they have all of these proper things? And I'm going to give our audience 3 table stakes requirements that you need to have. You need to have an exam table that lowers for patients. You need to have a wheelchair scale, and you need to have an adult changing table for incontinent adults. Those are the 3 things that you have to have at least in one exam room. And those are low cost. These are low cost solutions, but they are must haves to accommodate the population that we're trying to treat. I mean, you think about if we're delivering, a trial for, patients with ALS or DMD, or so many of the rare diseases, to have a site that's not equipped for these things, it's just not going to work for the patient. And again, speaking of a broken system, ADA is just not cutting it, my friends. We need to evolve ADA into so much more, because it's just not, I live it every day. It's just not working for Emmett. So, we need to do better. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing in conjunction with our friends at SCRS is that, first, let's normalize the conversation. It's okay to talk about disabilities. What are those? And those could be sensory as well. ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia, any of these mental health related disabilities. It is okay. Let's talk about what you need to be your fullest self to participate in a clinical trial, and let's make those accommodations.
Yeah. I think some people sometimes kind of are nervous to have that conversation, or are nervous to
They are.
ask. And I think kind of bringing back Alicia's empathy point, it's like if you're coming to these conversations with your, I keep saying your, this hat and that hat, but if you're coming with your empathy hat on, I think people are happy to engage and have a conversation and be like, here's the reality of
Well,
it. I don't think people would be like, how dare you ask,
well, and Alicia can chime in on this, but having cancer, oh, how do I talk about cancer? And so many of my friends, they knew I had cancer, but they didn't know what to ask. So they
Mm.
didn't ask anything. And that's worse, right, Alicia? I mean, it's worse because they're over there, and they're whispering about you and they don't know what to say. Because you don't know what to say, do not say anything. Just as you said, and to Alicia's point, just lead with love. Lead with love. I don't know how to ask, but I want to have the conversation. I don't know what's the right way, but I want to have the conversation. I want to know. Can you help me?
I mean, that's great advice. Just straight up have the conversation and be willing to say, hey, I don't know I don't know how to
I don't know what I
react.
don't
I don't know what to say, but I'm thinking of you, and I'm here for you. Tell me what you need, or hey, I'm going to come over and we can just sit on the couch, and we don't even have to talk. Maybe we'll watch a movie. Maybe we'll just sit there in silence. But here I am. Like show up for somebody in a way that's real, that's authentic, and don't be afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking we could end on I was going to say fun question. Social media can go a lot of different ways, but we'll say it's fun. But you guys have talked a bit about your experiences over the past 30 plus years, and obviously part of a big thing of the past 30 plus years is the rise of social media. And you've both spoken about how social media has played a role in shaping community and advocacy for both of you. So maybe Alicia, we'll start with you first. And
Sure.
we've talked a little bit before about the BCSM hashtag and how you've used that hashtag and kind of the impact you've seen it have. So tell us a little bit about that for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, I guess the quick background on it. When I was first diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was a sophomore in college, there was absolutely no way to find other people of my age that were dealing with Hodgkin's lymphoma. I mean, there was nobody else at Syracuse University going through that experience. You'd go to the cancer center. I was the youngest one there by probably 40 years. And it was a very isolating experience. Very, very isolating. And I think when I was diagnosed again in 2004 and 2008 with breast cancer, I realized how the fundamental change that had occurred from when I was first diagnosed in 1990 to 2004 was the internet. And, I had an aha moment one day when I was in the hospital, I was, really having a down moment, thinking like, gosh, the hospital, the cancer support group at the hospital had no idea what to do with me because I was a two different kind of cancer survivor that, I didn't check the box for any of the support groups that they had, but I knew I needed something. I needed some kind of support. And I think I realized I had already had I knew what Twitter was. I didn't have an account, but I had a friend that had come to visit me in the hospital. And she said, I was on Twitter the other day and she's like, there's a lot of people that put cancer survivor in their profile. Like maybe you can find somebody on Twitter that's just like you or going through something similar. And I remember thinking, I'm like, yeah, Twitter's not going to help me. Twitter, that's not going to work for me. But I don't know, something later that night, I'm like, I've got to give this a try. Like I need to figure out how to connect with somebody else that understands what the heck I'm going through, because if not, this is going to be a lonely life. So I did, I signed up for Twitter, and within a week, I think I had 100 new best friends that were cancer survivors, that some had even had Hodgkin's and breast cancer. And we basically made our own community on Twitter. And I realized that I literally had the power of the globe in my hand, in my cell phone at the time. Like the power of connection was just incredible. And I happened to meet another cancer survivor through Twitter that was a breast cancer advocate. I mean, she was a little bit further in her advocacy journey. And she just said, we've got an opportunity to start, hashtags were coming into the forefront of use. People were using it to tag things like their sports teams or hobbies or, breaking news articles, things like that. And we said, why don't we follow what we're learning from some of these other big healthcare organizations that were using the HCSM hashtag for healthcare social media when they were sharing an article from PubMed or the NCI. And we started using BCSM for breast cancer social media, just as a way to like share information or share articles, share research that we thought was pretty interesting. And then on July 4th, 2011, we started what we called our BCSM Twitter chat. Monday nights, 9 o'clock at night, Eastern Standard Time. Every Monday night for 11 years, we went with a Twitter chat. And we created a global community. And let me tell you, the BCSM, those 4 little letters have changed my life, because I think it was BCSM's reach and the fact that, I had started this effort with another cancer survivor, really brought exposure to the work that I was trying to do to change the patient experience. And it really changed my life. It opened doors that I didn't even think were possible. And it started me down this path. And just interesting side note for our conversation here today, I met Stacy because of Twitter. I'm,
Stole my line. I met
sorry.
Alicia through
Go
Twitter.
for it.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta just brag on Alicia for a minute, because I really just have to brag on Alicia for a minute, because as I was building up, my advocacy career, and when I started my own patient, what has come to be today, patient engagement, my consulting business, I followed Alicia, and I followed what she was saying, the topics that she was covering, and she reinforced my confidence to know this is a thing. This is what we should be doing. I mean, Alicia was leading a movement. I mean, she's selling herself. She's very humble and selling herself short. She was it. She was my idol. I mean, I was fangirling on her. And I was just like, one day I want to meet this woman, because she inspired me so much. She inspired me as, a leader on social media, as a survivor, as how she is mobilizing patients. And just, I'm like, I can't wait to meet her. And I'll never forget at CNS Summit when, I just was standing there and I felt a tap on the shoulder and I turned around and it was Alicia. And I know exactly where I have that photo of us together. And I just said, this is so overwhelming to meet you because I followed you. And fun fact is that, when I decided to pivot from my consulting business to go back to work full time, and I was considering some opportunities, the first person that I called was Alicia Staley. And I have my notebook of my notes of our conversation. And I said, you are a leader at Medidata and you are leading patient engagement at Medidata. What advice do you have for somebody like me who wants to go back into industry? And I have those notes. And I don't want to get emotional, but it meant a lot to me. And, and it's just because of people like her that I'm doing what I'm doing. And we need more of us is basically the call to action is that, if you're out there listening and you're a patient advocate and you're just like, hey, I want to do this, please know that your voice matters and these opportunities in industry are increasing for patient advocates like us. So.
Thank you, Stacy. That really means a lot, but I mean, you've got to give yourself some credit. You have really put in the work. You've put in the effort. You have become a champion in your own right in what you're doing. You really have. And I think seeing the work that you're doing at Parexel right now motivates me even more. That how can we as industry collaborators work together to really bring about something significant change for the patient experience. And I think that we're very well positioned to really start delivering on that. And I think, I'm grateful for the opportunity that we've had here today for this conversation. And thank you to the ACRO team for facilitating this, because I think it's critical. This is the first step of a pretty intense journey that we're committed to taking. And, I don't think I'm ever going to slow down until I really see significant change. And that's what drives me every day. And I feel very lucky that, I got Stacy as I would say co-conspirator, but how about co-collaborator?
Co-collaborator.
A collaborator in collaborator in arms on
That's
this, because it does take a team. This is not a solo effort. And for every person that we can turn into champions and ambassadors for this movement, the more hands that we will have for help. So.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
right on.
I mean, I just have to brag on both of you. I think you both are just tremendous forces in the industry doing amazing work. So I felt very lucky to have this chat with you guys and all of our little preceding chats. This has been so wonderful. I know you're both also extremely busy, so we really appreciate you guys sitting down.
An important
we will always make time for conversations like these.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you to ACRO. Thank you, Alicia. We're only getting started. This is just the beginning.
That's right.
Thank you both so much. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of GCP. Be sure to join me back here next Tuesday when I'm joined by Tala Fakori from the FDA and Stephen Pike from Parexel to talk about AI, ML, and drug development.